about message mindset. So those four lovely ladies in the picture came up with message mindset as a way to support each other and support the interpretive world. And as we've been working together over the last, I think, almost 3 years, really, geez, Louise. We found really great ways to support interpreters and support trainers, either in this is our website, by the way, Heritage Interpretation Training, Message Mindset, and there's all kinds of great resources on here. We're building more all the time. Our bread and butter is the Certified Interpretive Guide. That's how we all four of us came together. We're all trainers formally for NAI. And so on our website, we have our main page lists some of the different classes that come up. Whoops, sorry, that is faster than I wanted to go. But our main thing is our learning hub. And there you can look at what classes are coming up and how to earn your certificate for either the Certificate of Interpretive Guiding or Certificate of Interpretive Hosting. We try to post our upcoming classes on there. We are developing some asynchronous material, which will be really, really awesome. That's one of the things that I'm going to be focusing as I move into this. And then our live web events, which you're here. Awesome. So this is a great place to find out more about that. We also have a wonderful blog and some other resources on our page, and we're building those up all the time. Like I said, the Certified Interpretive Guide course, Certificate of Interpretive Guiding course is our bread and butter. That's how we met. So you can find out more about these classes coming up. The price did raise for these classes, but we are still offering not only the class, but some ways to attend the class, maybe without the certificate. If you're in a position where maybe you're not a job seeker anymore and that certificate isn't important to you, but the learning is awesome. So those are some options for you out there. Our next session like this is going to be August 19th. So during this session, I'm going to be putting up the registration for that session, and you all will be the first to know. I will put that link in the chat and make an announcement that registration is up. Hopefully it'll only take me a couple minutes, but Menno Brain is on task today. So hopefully it won't take me too long to remember how to put that together. But that's August 19th, and we're going to be talking about value-based interpretive conversations. And our past events, like I said, we record these. So our past events are all on our YouTube channel. That's at Message Mindset, youtube.com/Message Mindset. You can find us there. And now to today's session, I'm going to turn it right over to Kristen, and I'm going to remove my slides just in case Kristen had some slides she wants to share, or we can look at each other's beautiful faces. Everybody's just beautiful today. That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop my screen share.
All right. So welcome. I know some of you I don't know. As Nikki said, when the group of us came together, one of the things that we were really doing, we were all training the NAI's Certificate of Interpretive Guiding. We were also all teaching other kinds of interpretive classes. And one thing that was really meaningful to us were the conversations where we shared tips, ideas, and skills in terms of helping bring out the best, helping support new interpreters, who might be in our orbit. And I actually have no PowerPoint slides today because instead of running a mini training, which is typically what I do with these, a little mini training, a little Q&A after, this is really meant to be a discussion where all of us have a chance to come together and share ideas. And the root of it is this. As Nikki mentioned, we all sort of have our own different areas that we train in. One of mine is touchy subjects. I spend time helping interpreters prepare for presentations that, whether they deserved to be or not, have gotten caught up in the polarization of our times. Or maybe we're living through a heightened moment, but I would argue, I think we lost Monique. Anyway, I would argue it's not unheard of, particularly with adults who learned history, culture, or science one way in school, and then they come to an interpreter and we hit them with something that is not what they learned. And it's just the way brains work. Sometimes people have a little mental hiccup and they have to figure out, like, I don't know if I believe this. I don't know. Maybe I'm hearing something I'm not comfortable with. So this moment is heightened, but I would argue this moment is not entirely new. And so when one of the pieces of teaching new interpreters is teaching them ideas about quality research, that was sort of the nugget that I thought we could explore today. So here is how I thought today could go. There is a page in the workbook we use, Teaching CIG, that puts together two things. Number one of them is a framework that resources could either be biased or balanced. And I have wondered, and I have my own opinions about whether or not that's the most useful framework. The other thing this page says is your resources, the things, places you go for research should support your point of view. And that's another idea I have been challenging in my own work because in a divided environment, I would argue we need to be ready for more points of view than just the ones we advocate. If what we really want to do is create an inclusive space, that means including people who disagree with us. We want them to stay in the conversation because if they leave, we have zero possibility of reaching them with new ideas and thought provocation. And then the last question, if we have any time, and I'm hoping we will because I think it's a good one. Monique agreed to maybe take the reins of this last question, is how do we need to think about research when what we are actively trying to do is create programs that include perspectives from previously or historically marginalized groups and communities. So 3 different ways to think about research that go beyond what is in our traditional CIG training program. And so I thought I would kick it off with one of the exercises I do use in class. I have a little Padlet. So I'm hoping whether you are camera on or camera off, that you will play along. So let me put the Padlet up on the screen and I'll show you one of the things that I do. So I said in my little preamble, actually, before I totally preamble this, would you either raise a physical or a digital hand if part of your role is supporting other interpreters, training, coaching, mentoring? Maybe it's as a peer mentor. So everybody does this to some degree in their role. Tracy and Lucas, you are welcome to raise a digital hand or unmute and say yes, no, maybe.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. Is it just out of curiosity, Tracy? Is it something? Whoops, she'll be back. And Lucas, I met Lucas recently at a conference. I do believe that this is part of his role. Hi, Lucas.
Sorry, hi, I was briefly distracted. I missed the prompt.
Quite all right. The question is just, I want to make sure I know who's in the room, whether or not training, coaching, mentoring, supporting interpreters is part of your role.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I figured. Okay. Welcome back, Tracy. We lost you.
Sorry.
No worries. My question for you is if this is something that you are aspiring to have a role that includes this, or you just like being able to be a peer mentor if people have questions?
I'm currently job seeking, trying to get back into California state parks after I voluntarily voluntarily separated for a travel sabbatical, a very long one. But I used to do that. I'm currently teaching yoga, so I think I'm in this realm that everyone's been speaking of.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to make sure that I had my head in the right space because as we know as trainers, if we know a little something about our audience, we can make sure that we are creating opportunities that work for everybody. So the thing that I mentioned when we kicked off, I stopped finding the idea of a resource could be either biased or balanced to be a particularly useful framework. Most of my work has always been in the history area. But even in the sciences, if somebody puts a diary or a set of letters in my hand, that's gold. And yet, those are absolutely going to have the bias, the perspective of whoever wrote the letter or the diary. So rather than talking about whether something is biased or balanced, I would throw out there, I think it's the job of the interpreter to create balance. And one of the things, if that is, if that's germane to what we're teaching or what we're talking about, when we're evaluating resources, it's helpful to understand, am I looking at something that is more factual? Is it more perspective? What context might I need to give my audience members about any research that I have done? So I took a different approach. And when I talk about this with students, I ask them to think about resources and decide whether they think it is more factual or more perspective. Because as we have learned about implicit bias, unconscious bias, as well as our conscious partisan biases, we are learning most things carry a little bit of that unconscious bias, whether it's in the way a question is phrased or something else. So I start with this exercise, and I'd like you all to play along. I'm going to assign you one of these tiles. Your task is to decide, are you going to put it in the more fact column where you see I put census raw data, or whether you are going to put it in the more perspective column where you see I have put Facebook. And there's only a few of us. I would love to hear. What I typically do with students is I ask them why. In 1 or 2 sentences, why did you decide to put it in the column you chose? Because every single one of these, with the exception of weather data, I'm not going to assign anybody weather data, but with the exception of weather data, every single one of these has shown up at least once in both columns. So it's meant to spark a conversation about thinking about resources. So Nikki, if you are playing along right now, I will give you number 2. Anita, I'm going to give you number 4. Monique, I will give you number 6. And Lucas, I will give you number 9. And Tracy, I will give you number 10. So just grab, oh, shoot. It also helps if I put the link in the chat so that you can go to the Padlet and move the tile. So give me 1 second. I actually have this ready to go, I think. Yes. So if you go to that link, if you click on it, you will be able to grab your tile and move it to your preferred column. And if you can't move it, I know, like Anita, you might be on a mobile device that is not cooperating. Tell me where you want your tile moved and I'm happy to move it for you.
Is it an either or?
Either or. Yep.
All right. I'm going to put it under more perspective, industry magazine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anybody else who would like me to move their tile, I'm happy to, just sort of in the interest of time.
Can you move my tile? Sorry, number 10. This is Tracy to it's a personal perspective. It's a bias.
All right. Anybody else?
Mine is number 2 was books with footnotes and bibliography. Because that's a secondary source and people have to, there's not just one person's take on that information. There's usually a committee or a team that's working on it. Then I will say it's not, it's a secondary source. So it's more factual.
Okay. Lucas.
Yeah, I dropped National News Hour to more perspective, partly because it's very broad. We don't know which National News Hour we're talking about, but newsrooms tend to have a narrative that they're trying to push up to an extent. You want to get a variety of news sources to get a range of perspectives.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who hasn't had a chance to say why they put their tile where they did? Some of you just went right to that phase of it, so thank you. Is there anybody else who hasn't, who wishes to?
Sure, I can. I went back and forth with, I had artificial intelligence, and I think it really depends. You can have a closed loop system with artificial intelligence that allows you to only feed the data that you want to provide the citations and provide the resources from. And again, that still has some bias to me because it's coming from a perspective of an organization that's only allowed certain documents to be placed into the fact-finding mission. I feel like AI is getting better and it still hallucinates, which means that it can still make up data to fit to answer the question that we've posed. And I see it evolving. I mean, it's evolving so fast over time and space with more diverse voices adding their stories to this large language model. and it has a ways to go. So I'm going to keep it in perspective more than fact at this point.
Thank you. Did everybody have a chance to comment who wanted to? I can't remember. That's my mental brain. All right. So what you all started doing was sort of explaining why you chose. Some of you were talking about why there might be an argument to pop it into the other column. Would it surprise you to know that even census raw data has come over here? It surprises you. For those of you that, oh, it doesn't surprise you. And with a group of trainers, I'm not altogether surprised that you're not surprised. But what comes up for you when we think about popping the raw census data into the more perspective bucket? Anita.
You had to pick what data to gather. You could have looked at other things. So it's perspective of what you're looking, the information you're looking for.
Right. And the way the question was written. I had one student tell me this story, and I think that you've probably all heard something similar. She was a mixed race woman. Her mother and her grandmother were both mixed race women. And there were censi where they had to pick one, and they picked different things. So the question and the way people are permitted to answer these questions can skew it. And so, we've had rich conversations about stories from oral tradition, personal recollections, how brains work, how memory works. All of these at some point have sparked a conversation about what we need to think about when we decide to use data from any of these resources, and then how we can help our audience look at the data with open minds. It can affect us as researchers so that we don't believe something too readily or dismiss something too readily. I'm going to go ahead and take this down. I'm curious, for those of you with us today, how do you think about teaching this concept to people? Do you teach this concept to people? The idea of we all have to evaluate our resources, and the ways in which we do that, the ways in which it is important to do that, I think they've evolved over my lifetime, certainly.
One of the things I recognize is that our interpreters tend to change agencies kind of on a regular basis. And so what flies at one agency may not fly at another agency. So I train this with that in mind, is that think about the current place you work, or if you're a job seeker, the dream job that you have, or maybe just where you're at personally right now. And we do this with a disco dance party, because I'm on Zoom, so we need to move around a little bit. We need an excuse to move around. But I just did this last week in person too. Is that there's some sources you cannot share, and so your dance move is this, some sort of like. There's some sources you can share, and that's good. And there's some sources that are like, it really depends on how it's written. And I give a huge list. So I'm playing dancing queen, and we're, I'm throwing out this list, and we're seeing how people respond. And that's what I hope they walk away with, is that, hey, at this place I do more lobbying, so I can put this message forward. At this place, it's much more sterile. Because we have such a wide range of people, we don't get into controversial subject. So, there's those type of kind of extremes. Also, we're looking at each one of those examples going, oh, can I share this from a parallel agency? Do I trust that agency enough? And so, while we're doing this disco dance party, there's some, some that really stick out that we talk about after the fact.
I love disco dance party. I may be stealing that. What else? What else, if anything, do you presently do to kind of spark people to think about resources that they use, and maybe even broaden their thinking and challenge themselves to stay curious about something they're inclined to believe, have a little healthy skepticism or a little bit of, curiosity, whether you believe it instinctively or not? I do see, Tracy, you popped something into the chat, and I think I may have been past what you were responding to. Did you want to say what you meant by in regards to primary sources? I guess my choice would actually be the other. Forgive me that I'm not connecting that to something.
It was the activity we did and the choices of the categories. I'm not sure if I totally understood what we were doing, and I thought that maybe the primary source was less biased because it's coming from the source. Someone was talking about their choice and saying it was a secondary source. So I was just trying to pop it in the other category, but then I was like, what's going on? Which one should I pick? So that was in regards to our last activity.
Okay. And I think that's kind of the point of the activity, is to get people to realize there's a lot more under the hood of any of these sources. Even if we think this is really factual, people are always bringing up elements, nuances, where perspective, where implicit bias, I'm talking about those unconscious ones that people don't even realize are in play in their brains. Some of it is straight up neurobiology. Some of it is the way we've been conditioned to think about various things. Is that something that you talk about, or that is useful to talk about? Sort of us as researchers challenging our own inclinations to believe or disbelieve certain sources?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay. What, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, because like you said, even memory and recollection has its own bias. We change over time. We
Yep.
develop new memories that change old ones, new ideas that change old ideas. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, thinking about something like recollection or oral tradition. Oral tradition is one that I think people are realizing there is no more or less reason to discount something from oral tradition versus something that was written down in a book. Both of them, somebody's brain was the intervening piece. And in many cultures that value their oral traditions, people, they are trained. There is a process by which they make sure those traditions stay as steady as if the words had been written down in a book. We don't change words. We don't change inflection. We don't change the way it was originally, told. So traditional ecological knowledge. Yes, Monique. So it's an interesting idea, especially when we have visitors who don't automatically agree with us and sometimes might say, where did you get that? Well, here's the kinds of resources that I use, and here's how I think about them. Here's the grain of salt I take even with this. These are sort of helping our visitors understand how we construct knowledge. But I want to move on to my second sort of question, unless anybody has anything they want to particularly pop in. I don't want to go too quick.
I think the ways we look at research is evolving. I'm just going to put an article in the chat that talks about decolonizing methodologies and qualitative research, just creating space to let different ways of knowing stand along that traditional Western point of view of fact finding and data, and seeing it as equivalent or even more when we're looking at how we use and employ our resources for our programs.
And this, Monique, that was a great transition, as well as what Nikki had brought up, because the thing that I want to shift to is the fact that we do get people coming to our organizations who believe very strongly the way they believe, and it's not always aligned with what we are putting forward. I had a student reach out to me, it was like a year after she'd been through class. She said, I do a geology tour in a park, and we have a very traditional Christian community that are of the belief that the earth is only 4,000 some years old. And she was actually challenging the science because she believes differently. And while that may be a bit particular to her location, things that get caught up in the news, things that get caught up in community conversations. We increasingly live in bubbles. So are you doing anything right now? Is anybody doing anything right now to help prepare interpreters to welcome and yet perhaps manage to some degree, because we have to keep our programs on the rails, but how do we welcome and manage viewpoints that are at odds with what we are presenting? Okay, Tracy, this will be posted. She will see that when she gets the wrap up after the meeting. I'm happy to kick it off. I just don't necessarily want to be the only voice in the room. One of the things that I do talk to students about whose work, it's easiest in some ways if the work has gotten caught up in the news cycles, whether it is like NBC or whether it is long form magazines or the Twitter sphere. If it's something people are talking about, go do some opposition research. Figure out what people are seeing in the news, in the Twitter sphere, on the Facebook, on the TikTok reels. What are people seeing? See if you can get a diverse, because there's often more than just 2 points of view out there. Can you find multiple different points of view? And then take the time to research those different points of view to understand for your own self, is there anything backing this up? Because sometimes we might be surprised to find there actually is something that's logical. Okay, it's logical, but can I substantiate it? Yes or no? The more we understand the frameworks that people walk in the door having in their brains, the more we can be prepared if they say, hey, I heard da 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 da. We have the opportunity to say, I read that too. I was out on Twitter last night. I saw somebody say that. So I dug. So far, I haven't found any substantiation. Have you? And maybe they have. But what you just did was validated the human being, even while you didn't necessarily lend credence to the perspective, because you hadn't found any yet. That's, I spend a little time talking with folks about, in fact, almost exactly that much time, because there's so much time in a CIG. But what about you all? Is that something that has become a thing where you work, where you're presenting one perspective and maybe people aren't coming to your site because the perspective you present is not what they believe? Is that something you're finding and feeling?
So what I find particularly useful to do with audiences in relation to any topic, because really any topic can be polarizing without you being aware of it in advance, is to get those initial perspectives through a kind of active listening session. I want to know as much as I can about the audience that's in front of me, because I'm not sure that I can do enough opposition research in regards to the subjects that we have. There's a lot of prep we can do, but there's just so much out there. With that active listening, you don't necessarily, as you're saying, validate the person's perspective, but you do thank them for sharing it. And you can move on from that space. If people feel heard, they're more likely to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. Bingo.
I agree with that. I was actually just putting one in the chat that I use. It's called the Apple method, and it's not letting me. It's too many points of view, too much information. I'll see if I can find the article, but active listening is so important. And I find that especially when you know your resource, if there are frequently asked questions or frequently asked perspectives that are coming up time and time again, I think it's okay. And I think it's really important to alert your interpreters about that. You're going to encounter this, you're going to have this different point of view. And here is our perspective. Here's the science that we've used, while you acknowledge the other person's perspective and validate that they have the option to keep that perspective as well, and just share, here's what we've found. Here's what our data shows. So
I think it's important.
Go ahead.
I think it's important also expanding on what you're talking about, Monique, is this, how do we even respond to people? A lot of there's a lot of terms that especially we interpreters use that are already off-putting, like the instant we use them. And a couple things that are really helpful to me is shutting up, listening to what they're saying and how they're saying it, and going, oh, okay, how do I um uh, what kind of language do I need to use? So it's looking for those universals and pointing those out. Oh, we totally agree on these. Looking for videos in which people are doing that. YouTube is a one. You know, well, you have to sift through a lot of a lot of crap to find that stuff, but finding ways of conversations happening that and a lot of it is just simplifying how we talk. We use an amazing amount of $25 words when 25-cent words would just be fine. And it really takes it down a notch to a much more reality-based level, I think. And then there's also, Lucas, you were talking about doing some listening sessions and finding out more and researching more. What I find really helpful and provoking at the same time is looking at the comments in when there's either you know, Facebook is the best place to find comments, and sometimes in the news sources you can't go to those comments. But what I like about it is a couple things. One is that there are unfortunately a lot of bots putting out a lot of stuff out there that's just to rile people up, and we've got to so take any of those comments with a grain of salt. But there are also real people in there really trying to share how they feel despite all that chatter, and it's really, so a lot of times they come off as angry or frustrated because they're just trying to claw out of the robot chatter that's in there, or help themselves be heard in an efficient manner. But I think scanning those before you talk about something is will allow you to have the shock of that response in private so that you can think about it over a couple days and go, wow, how would I respond to someone saying this to me? And in a way that's caring and allows them to share their experience and allows a de-escalation process to happen, because I, for one, cannot come up with the right thing to say at that moment in time. 2 days later, 3 days later, a week later, I can figure out what to say. But that gives me the space to internalize it and be messy with it, and then come back and go, okay, if somebody did this to me, how would I respond? And the nice part about it is when we are in real life, people are usually not that angry or in your face. I mean, they do this online because it's an anonymous place to do it. But in person, when we're faced with another person, we do have that intrinsic want to be respectful to somebody else. And that, you know, we can pat people on the back for that, at least. Just, hey, thanks for sharing this concern with me. This is a really hot topic right now. And then giving them the space. I'm still formulating my thought on it. Tell me your thought. I want to hear it. So when we can approach them with that skill of listening, but it is hard because it takes up a lot of space. So if you have an agenda to kind of get through, or especially if your agency says, oh, you need to talk about this for this length of time, it does get really difficult to figure out how to have those conversations. And maybe it's, I'm still formulating myself. I'm still figuring out how to write this. Can you listen to me? Do you have time to stay after so we can have a conversation about it? Because I really would like your input. Or here's my card. Can we maybe talk later about this? Because I have to do this right now, but I'm going to do this program again next week, and I'd like to include some more thoughts. And it's okay to have that those messy times and messy moments, and but it's also really difficult to create a space where you're giving over that program. And even if you're a trainer, especially if you're a trainer, we've got all these, especially if you're training the NAI curriculum, we've got a lot of things we need to hit. And these are amazing, deep conversations that can really run away with the group that you're teaching for good reason. But it's also like, oh, shoot, we got a zillion other things we got to hit. How can we have this conversation even a little later?
And I was going to just add to what you were saying. I have learned these skills the best when I've failed at them. I've gone back and had to go through these conversations myself and have that replay moment afterwards and say, what would I have said here? How would I have addressed that? And the two biggest things I feel like, or the biggest thing I've come up with, especially when we ask questions and we're not quite sure of the answers we're going to get, is to put a time-bound response around it. For the next 2 minutes, we're going to talk about this. So the expectations are there in place for that. So then if it overflows, you can say, you know what, I'd love to talk more about this. And I love what you said, Nikki. I'm still formulating my response. And let's circle back to this later, because valuing the person in the conversation is very important, even as you're formulating your response.
You know, one of the things that struck me, you know, kind of between what a few folks have said is if you're in a situation where, like Lucas was saying, there's so many different ways that you could go with that kind of researching different perspectives. I love the personal touch that Nikki's talking about, where there's a human who has taken this risk to say, I see the world different than you. And to have that human to human opportunity, they may not stay and talk to us. They may not want a follow-up conversation with us, but it is an opportunity to have that human connection, which can also keep the temperature low, because now somebody is feeling like, okay, this person actually wants to hear me out. And then the other thing comes from something that Monique said, which is that, you know, if at your site, if in your own personal experience, you start to hear one or two things come up again and again and again, that might be an opportunity both to make sure that you have looked at all of the things that might be valuable for your own research. It may not be, it may be the same thing that's been debunked coming up over and over and over again. But that might be a clue that, you know, can't dig into all of it. This one might be worth digging into. And then to also think about presenting the things we present without the jargon. I know some of you have heard me say this before. I did work with a depolarizing organization called Braver Angels, and they had actually done some of their own research into language and were finding terms that in the political sphere, you use certain terms, the Republican leaning are going to immediately tense up a little bit. Other terms, the blue leaning, the Democrat leaning, are going to tense up a little bit. And if as presenters, I still love this idea of where can I have a human to human connection? Who do I know that looks at the world differently than me, but talks to me in my sphere? Hey, I've got to do this presentation. Would you listen to me? Am I using language that I don't realize will cause half of the room to wonder if I'm being fair? Wonder if I'm being, you know, if I really care about perspectives other than my own? And run it by them. Because half the time, it's language that we don't realize carries a charge for somebody else that we accidentally. The jargon giraffe, I have heard about that more than once lately. You know, so that's the trick with a lot of jargon. And it might even be there was one traditional ecological knowledge, or if you say different ways of knowing. In some spheres, we absolutely know what one another means by that. In some other spheres, I've heard some of those same terms described very unkindly. So if we're going to use a term, and I think sometimes it's so important to stand firm on language. Don't always give it away just because it might carry a charge. Sometimes we use the term, but we define it. I could say X. I want you to know that if you read this term other places, there's a good chance that this is what it means. This is all it means. So we have a few minutes left, even though it's meant to be 45 minutes, so we should be wrapping. But Monique had this last question about researching to present on historically marginalized perspectives from historically marginalized communities. Monique, do you wanna just kind of kick that out, and we'll spend just the last few minutes sharing any thoughts folks had, because I really like the way you said this yesterday.
And I don't know if I can recreate that. Let's see if I can. I guess I'm asking all of you, when you consider underserved communities or marginalized communities having programs specifically for these communities, how do you research or how do you connect with them to actually prepare a program and design one specifically for them? What do you do? And you can clarify, Kristen, if I'm not.
No, I mean, that was it. You, yesterday we started off because the first and foremost thing is, if you have the budget, or if you can honestly look at your budget and say, you know what, we could redirect this budget, pay people to come in as consultants from the community that you are seeking to correctly, represent the way they would like to be represented. Hire them, bring them in for their expertise. But not everybody has budget. Even if you look at it honestly, it's like lights on or pay consultants. And in that case, that was where you were talking about reciprocity and yeah.
Exploring ways for reciprocity, whereas if there's not money to pay people as consultants as you would for any type of program design or development, reaching out to these communities and saying, what would be valuable to you? Here are our resources. I'm going to open up our resource deck as far as what we have, whether it's open space or you have an exhibit or a site. What would be something that would be of value to you? Because the knowledge and the resources that you bring are valuable to us, and we want to honor that. And so that's maybe exploring different ways outside of paying someone to gain knowledge and understanding so you can design a program, you can co-create something that would be of value to communities that aren't showing up at your sites, and that you definitely want to have their voices as part of the conversation and as part of your community. So having said that, I don't know if Lucas or Anita, you have any ideas or examples of reaching out to communities that are underserved in your areas and what you did, but I would love to hear them.
Sure. I mean, right now I'm working on sort of an LGBTQ plus tour of our historic site, which was designed and lived in by an important gay architect. I happen to be gay myself, so it's helpful to be a part of that community when designing that program. But I mean, a big part of my starting process has been getting to know, I'm also new to my region, but has been getting to know the local LGBTQ communities. So I'm working actually with a local gay bar to kind of get test audiences in place, where our normally very high ticket price is waived, and we have a nice conversational approach through the space. Now, we're going to pilot in April, so I'm taking a really long time to do that. But there's also just a lot of research to be done into the primary and secondary sources, because it's not research that has been prioritized here in the past.
Thank you. Anita, were you going to say something?
No, I'm still in the learning curve. I'm just listening. Mm-hmm.
When I was at Natural Areas, we wanted to reach out to the LGBTQI plus community as well. And connecting with them, with a local staff member, we found out that many people did not feel safe or secure on the community hikes. So we created hikes, especially for this community, and they've been successful. There's been a level of safety and security in having hikes serve them directly. And I love what you also said about going slow. I think that's a really critical way to not rush through ideas or thoughts or what a community might need. So I appreciate that, and I applaud you for doing that.
One of the things that I'll jump in on is I often talk to interpreters in my courses about who they're part of how we decide our audiences, what their motivations are, who we're talking to, and we can talk to people who are already on board. I taught, the statement is, are we speaking to the choir? And I love bringing that up because there are positives and negatives to it. If we're talking to people if we're talking to the choir, they're already invested. How can we level them up another moment? They're the most ready for our message, for our provocation, for the call to action. What a wonderful gift that is. If we're not serving people that we can, then here's this other opportunity, is is maybe they're the choir, but they haven't sung at our site yet, you know. So how do we help them to feel secure? But there's also this group that's not the choir at all, and don't want to set foot inside. And it's just thinking about, Lucas, what a neat program you're developing. And I will also say that over time, as you're figuring out how to communicate it to this audience that I think is going to be really receptive to this, how do you also create a program to the audience that's not receptive to this at all? And it's difficult work for us. And so it's not for everybody, and not everybody has the time or energy or emotional capacity to do it. So it's not putting in any like, oh, you should. It's how can I relay this same message to the anti-choir as in addition to the choir, and what kind of opportunities does that give me? I mean, here that can create this marvelous opportunity of showcasing the great work of this architect that was in the gay community to people who maybe are like not okay, or not getting that there's that the gay community can have wonderful, you know, it's, to me, I can't even formulate this sentence, like the gay community wouldn't have these wonderful ability to create marvelous works of architecture, of course, but there are people who think that way. So, you know, what can we might be able to do to talk to the anti-choir too, and it's changing our purpose a little bit. It's awareness rather than leveraging them to maybe share it with the community. It's just an awareness, or a listening level, or a conversation level, rather than taking up the commitment. So I always ask my students, think about who the choir is, and are you speaking to them? Do you want to challenge yourself a little bit more to reach another group? Or maybe the choir isn't actually even there, and you want to pull them in. So that might be something to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think part of it has been that that anti-choir that you're describing is our primary audience.
Okay, they're already there.
So that is a huge part of the process. Yeah.
We are actually at the top of the hour, and I want to thank everybody for attending. Gabby, welcome. We are just wrapping up. Nikki, do you want to throw up those final slides and
Yes.
show what we will be talking about next session?
Yes. Well, and I'll show you the slides, but I also want to say we just got the registration up, which is awesome. Monique's going to be leading our next session. Let me put everything back where it needs to be here. There we go. That does not help me. Sorry. Still relearning how to use Zoom at this very moment. And at the same time, every time I say sorry and the phone's next to me, AI lights up going, yes? Like, no, not Siri. Sorry. All right. So our next session, this is so cool. We're getting really excited about this too. This is a different way of doing our sessions. So we're really excited about this opportunity. So our next training session, Monique, will you put in just a minute, because you're the one kind of came up with this idea. So you spend a minute talking about it.
Well, and I was thinking about it yesterday, and my main question, like my guiding question for this is, when was the last time a visitor conversation shifted your perspective? So thinking about those conversations and looking at values that are connected between you as the interpreter, your organization, and the visitor, even if you might have different outcomes for that value. So we might practice some conversations. I'm still formulating what we're going to do, but this is something that's deeply rooted in my work when we consider the questions that we ask and the answers that we're getting, how we can build bridges with each other and see, yes, we both value freedom. We both value justice. We both value community, even if we're coming at it from different perspectives.
Awesome. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yes.
And just to remind you, all our past events are on YouTube. I should have this up on YouTube within a week or so. So if you have